blue folder slipped from my trembling hands, scattering papers across the polished courtroom floor. All eyes turned to me as my daughter-in-law's voice cut through the silence. "This old woman has no voice here," she said with a smirk, leaning toward her expensive attorney. "She's confused, forgetful. You know how they get." The way she said they liked I was a different species made my chest tightened. 57 years on this earth, 32 years as a registered nurse, and here I was being erased by a woman half my age who'd known my son for barely 3 years. I could feel Judge Winters studying me as I bent to gather my documents, doctor's reports, bank statements, photographs, all the evidence they tried to keep me from presenting. My knees cracked as I knelt down, and I heard someone snicker. But when I looked up, the judge's eyes met mine, and I saw something there that made me stand a little straighter. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said, silencing the room with just those two words. "In my courtroom, everyone has a voice, especially those who others tried to silence. We weren't always enemies, Caroline and I. 5 years ago, when Michael first brought her home, I welcomed her with an open heart and my grandmother's chicken pot pie recipe, the one I'd never shared with anyone outside the family. My son had been single for so long after his divorce from Elaine that seeing him smile again was enough for me. Caroline was beautiful and charming with those perfect teeth and that tinkling laugh that made everyone turn and look. She called me Mom on that very first visit, hugging me tight as she whispered, 'I've always wanted a mother like you.' I was so touched I gave her my mother's pearl earrings right then and there, the ones I'd been saving for when Michael had a daughter. Our Sunday dinners became a tradition. Caroline would arrive with expensive wine I couldn't pronounce the name of, and stories about her job at the marketing firm where she was this close to making partner. Michael beamed with pride next to her. I'd never seen my practical, steady son so smitten. "She's special, Mom," he'd say when we had a moment alone. "I know she can be a lot sometimes, but she's had it rough. No real family growing up." And so I doubled down on being the mother she never had, hosting holidays, remembering her birthday with thoughtful gifts, listening to her dreams and disappointments. The wedding was small but elegant, held in my backyard where Michael had played as a boy. I spent weeks planting new flowers, painting the fence, making everything perfect. I gave them a check for $15,000, nearly half my retirement savings, as a wedding gift. "For your future," I said, pressing it into Michael's hand. "Made for a down payment on that house near Oakage you've been eyeing." Caroline kissed my cheek that day and whispered, "You are the only mother I need in my life now." I held that moment close, believing I'd gained a daughter instead of losing a son. The shift was so gradual, I barely noticed it happening. First came the canceled Sunday dinners. Caroline was too tired, had a deadline, a headache. Then my phone calls went to voicemail. My texts answered days later with brief responses. "Sorry, crazy busy." When I did see them, Caroline would check her watch throughout dinner, exchange glances with Michael when I spoke. Once I overheard her in the kitchen on the phone. "Yes, with the in the she can talk forever about nothing." I pretended not to hear, busying myself with dessert plates, trying to be less boring, less needy, less old. Michael changed to my thoughtful son who called me every other day, now seemed distant, distracted when we spoke. "Mom, we've got our own lives now," he said when I asked if everything was all right. "You can't expect us to check in with you about everything." I didn't expect everything, just something, some connection to the child I'd raised alone after his father left us for his secretary when Michael was only 9. But I swallowed my hurt and told myself this was normal, healthy even. They were building their life together. I should be happy for them. Then came that rainy Tuesday in March when everything changed. Michael called, his voice strange and tight. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important. Can I come over an hour later?" He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework, where we'd played Monopoly during power outages, where I'd held his hands as he cried over his divorce. But now he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Caroline, and I think it would be best if we managed your finances from now on," he said, sliding some papers across the table. "We are worried about you living alone, the way you sometimes forget things." The shock felt physical, like ice water in my veins. "What things do I forget, Michael?" My voice was steadier than I felt. "He mentioned a missed doctor's appointment rescheduled, not forgotten, an unpaid cable bill, disputed, not overlooked. The time I couldn't find my car at the mall. It was Christmas season and the lot was packed." Small normal things that happened to everyone now being used as evidence of my incompetence. I looked at the paper's power of attorney form, something about conservatorship. "Caroline's uncle is a financial advisor," Michael explained, not answering when I asked about fees or why this was suddenly necessary. "This is for your own good, Mom." I didn't sign. Something deep in my gut, some primal instinct, warned me not to. "I need to think about it," I said, and saw a flash of, was it anger, frustration, cross Michael's face before he composed himself. "Of course. Take your time," he said, but left the papers prominently on my counter. As he hugged me goodbye, it felt different, stiffer, like embracing a stranger. I watched through the window as he sat in his car for several minutes, phone to his ear before driving away. In that moment, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the March rain tapping at my windows. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my late husband John's warning before cancer took him 15 years ago. "Margaret, promise me you'll keep your independence. People change when money's involved." In the morning, I called my doctor and made an appointment for a complete cognitive assessment. If there was something wrong with my memory, I wanted to know from a medical professional, not my daughter-in-law. Suspicions. Dr. Morris had been my physician for 20 years. She'd know if I was slipping. 2 days later, Michael showed up unannounced with Caroline. I was in my garden planting the tomato seedlings. I nurture every spring. Caroline wrinkled her nose at my dirt-stained hands as she perched on the edge of my patio chair, looking out of place in her cream-colored pantsuit. "We thought we'd check on you," Michael said too brightly, "and see if you'd had a chance to look over those papers." I noticed he had a fresh copy in a folder. Had he expected the originals to be lost? Caroline's eyes kept drifting to my kitchen window, to my living room door, like she was taking inventory. I remembered how she'd always commented on my quaint little treasures, my mother's china cabinet, the antique clock from John's family, the silver tea service we'd received as a wedding gift. "Actually," I said, removing my gardening gloves carefully, "I have an appointment with Dr. Morris tomorrow for a full checkup." I didn't miss the quick glance they exchanged. "That's great, Mom," Michael said after a beat too long. "But this ain't about your health. It's about simplifying things for you." Caroline nodded vigorously. "We just want to take the burden off your shoulders, Margaret. Michael worries about you so much." The way she used my first name had always felt slightly disrespectful, but now it seemed almost dismissive. I invited them in for iced tea, stalling for time while my mind raced. As Caroline used the bathroom, I noticed Michael scanning my mail on the counter, looking for something. I asked and he jumped slightly. "Just seeing if you got that insurance form I told you about," he said. But I hadn't recalled any mention of insurance forms. When Caroline returned, she had a strange expression. "Your medicine cabinet is very full. Margaret, are you taking all those prescriptions?" I felt my face flush. I had exactly 3 medications for blood pressure, cholesterol, and the occasional headache. Was she implying I was over-medicated, confused about my own pills? They stayed for exactly 23 minutes. I watched the clock, feeling increasingly uneasy in my own home. As they were leaving, Caroline hugged me, holding a beat too long. "We just want what's best for you," she murmured, her perfume clouding around me, cloying and too sweet. "Don't you want Michael to have peace of mind?" The question lingered as they drove away, leaving me standing in my doorway, dirt still under my fingernails, feeling like I just survived an ambush rather than a family visit. Dr. Morris's assessment the next day was clear. "Margaret, I've known you for 2 decades. Your memory is perfectly normal for a woman of 57, better than mine, Frankly, she ran additional tests anyway, and the results confirmed what I already knew. Yeah, I was healthy, sharp, and absolutely capable of managing my own affairs. As I left her office, clutching the written report, I felt a weight lift, but it settled again when I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from Michael, followed by a text. How did the doctor? Yeah. Caroline found a great assisted living place. We should look at assisted living. The words stopped me cold in the clinic parking lot. I was a retired nurse who still volunteered twice weekly at the hospital, who maintained my own home, who traveled solo to visit my sister in Arizona every winter. I never even hinted at wanting to downsize, let alone move into an assisted living facility. What was happening? I drove home in a daze, the sunny April day, now seeming sinister. Somehow shadows where there shouldn't be. At home, I made myself a cup of strong tea and did something I'd never done before. I went through my financial documents with the eye of a suspicious stranger. My mortgage was paid off, John, and I had made sure of that before his diagnosis. My retirement account had $328,674 as of my last statement. I had $142,155 in savings, $15,980 in checking. My house, according to the last tax assessment, was worth approximately $375,000 in our modest but desirable neighborhood. All told, I was sitting on assets approaching $800,000, not a fortune, but substantial for a retired nurse in a small town. Enough to be tempting, perhaps, to someone with expensive tastes and ambiguous career prospects. The thought made me sick. Was I really suspecting my own son of trying to gain control of my monies? But then, was it really Michael behind this sudden concern, or was it Caroline's influence? I remembered how she'd rolled her eyes when I mentioned setting aside money for my grandchildren someday. If we have kids, she'd said pointedly, some of us have careers to think about first. Michael had looked uncomfortable, but remained silent, as he often did when Caroline made such pronouncements. I needed advice, but who could I trust? Not my son, apparently. Not yet, anyway. Not until I understood what was happening. I thought of my neighbor Grass, a retired attorney who'd become a friend over weekly bridge games. With shaking hands, I dialed her number. Grace, it's Margaret. I think I might be in trouble. Can I come over? Her immediate, concerned, of course, nearly broke me. When was the last time Michael had responded to me with such ready warmth? Grace listened without interruption as I laid out the strange visits, the financial papers, the assisted living comment. Her face grew increasingly brave. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. Margaret, I don't want to alarm you, but this sounds like the beginning of an elder exploitation attempt. I've seen it before, even within families. The term hit me like a slap. Elder exploitation. I wasn't even 60. I didn't feel elderly. But in Caroline's eyes, perhaps even in Michael's now, that's exactly what I was. Old, vulnerable, a problem to solve, or an asset to acquire. What do I do? I whispered, fighting back tears. Grace's answer was immediate and firm. First, you protect yourself and your assets. Then you try to understand what's really happening with Michael. Is he being influenced, or is he actively participating? She helped me make a list. Secure my financial accounts with new passwords and extra verification steps. Gather and secure important documents. Install a small security camera at my front door. Keep a detailed log of all interactions with Michael and Caroline and Margaret. She added gently, prepare yourself for this to get worse before it gets better. If they were really after control of your assets, they won't give up easily. I spent the next week implementing Grace's suggestions, feeling like a criminal in my own life. I moved some funds to a new account at a different bank. I changed the locks on my house. I started recording phone calls with Michael after researching that it was legal in our state with one-party consent. Each step made me feel simultaneously more secure and more heartbroken. Was this really necessary? Was I overacting? But then Michael called on Friday night, his voice tight with concern that didn't reach his eyes when he arrived at my door 20 minutes later. "Mom, Caroline and I are really worried. You were not answering all our calls. You changed your locks. What's going on?" I invited him in, noticed how he scanned the room again, looking for changes, perhaps. "I am fine, Michael. Just updating a few things around the house." I offered him coffee, but she declined. "Mom," he said, leaning forward on the sofa where he'd built blanket forts as a child, "we need to talk about your living situation. It's not safe for you here alone." I asked him to explain what specific dangers he perceived. He mentioned my back steps, which I'd had repaired last summer, the possibility of falls, though I'd never had one, the burden of home maintenance, which I managed just fine, hiring help for the heaviest tasks, as I always had. "Michael," I said, "finally, I have something for you." I handed him Dr. Morris's report, which clearly stated I had no cognitive impairments. He scanned it, his expression unreadable. "That's great, Mom, but this isn't just about your memory. It's about planning for the future." He pulled out the same documents again. Power of attorney, conservatorship papers. I noticed his hands were sweating. My son, who could stay cool during a crisis, was nervous. "If you love me," he said quietly, "you will sign these and let us help you." The words struck me like a physical blow, using love as leverage. My son would never, but here he was doing exactly that. "If you love me," I countered, my voice steadier than I felt, "you will explain why this is suddenly so urgent, when nothing in my circumstances has changed." Something flashed in his eyes. Frustration, anger, fear. He stood abruptly. "I can see you were being difficult about this. Caroline said you would be. Maybe we need to talk when you were in a more reasonable mood." After he left, I sat in my silent house, turning his words over and over. "Caroline said you would be." How much of this was coming from her? How much from him? I remembered how controlling relationships work. I had seen them as a nurse. Watched strong people become shadows of themselves under the influence of manipulative partners. Was that happening to my son, or was I making excuses for him because I couldn't bear the alternative that he was willingly trying to take advantage of me? The next morning, I went to the bank and spoke with Mr. Daniels, the manager who'd handled my accounts for years. His face grew serious as I explained my concerns. "Mrs. Reynolds, unfortunately, what you were describing is not uncommon. I recommend placing a fraud alert on your accounts and setting up a system where any large withdrawals require in-person verification." As he helped me implement these protections, he added quietly, "My own mother went through something similar with my brother. Family financial exploitation is more common than people realize, and it's vastly underreported because of the shame victims feel." Victims, the word echoed in my head as I drove home. Was that what I was now? The victim of a crime perpetrated by my own child? I thought of Michael as a boy, how he'd saved his allowance to buy me a birthday gift when he was 8, how he'd defended me fiercely when his father left, how he'd worked 2 jobs to help with household expenses while attending community college. When had that boy become this man who looked at me and saw a financial opportunity rather than his mother? For the next 2 weeks, I documented everything: calls, texts, visits. Michael's messages grew increasingly frequent and increasingly frustrated when I deflected discussions about the paperwork or assisted living. Caroline started calling, too. Her voice, honey, sweet Margaret, we're just so concerned. Michael can barely sleep for worrying about you. Then came the escalation I'd been dreading. They began telling family and friends I was declining, that they were handling a difficult situation. My sister called from Arizona. Alarmed, "Michael says you're forgetting things, refusing help." What's going on, Maggie? The isolation was beginning. Just as Grace had warned, it might create doubt about the Ellers' capacity, separate them from their support network, then swoop in as the concerned caretaker with a solution that coincidentally gives you control of their assets. It was textbook, according to the elder abuse literature Grace had shared with me. I sent my sister copies of my medical reports and explained the situation. She was horrified, but believed me immediately. That girl never did seem right to me, she said of Caroline. Too perfect, too practiced. Then came the day I arrived home from volunteer work to find Michael and Caroline's car in my driveway. Strange, since we had no plans to meet. Stranger still was the unfamiliar woman in a business suit standing on my porch with them. Mom, Michael called with false brightness. This is Diane from Sunset Acres, the assisted living place we told you about. She's here to give you a tour of their facilities. And I hadn't agreed to any tours. Hadn't expressed any interest in Sunset Acres, yet here they were ambushing me at my own home, expecting me to what? Get in the car and go pick out a room at a facility I'd never considered. I'm not interested in assisted living, I said firmly, brushing past them to unlock my door. Caroline's smile tightened. Margaret, be reasonable. We've gone to a lot of trouble to arrange this. The woman, Diane, looked uncomfortable. Perhaps this isn't the best time, she suggested, clearly sensing the tension. Why don't I leave some brochures and Mrs. Reynolds can call when she's ready to discuss options. Caroline shot her an irritated look. She's ready now. She's just being stubborn. I turned to face them fully, then drawing myself up to my full height, still an impressive 5'8". I am not moving to an assisted living facility. I am not signing over power of attorney. I am not incompetent, incapacitated, or in need of supervision. Now, please leave my property. Michael's face flushed red with shame or anger. I couldn't tell. Mom, you were embarrassing yourself, he hissed. We're trying to help you. Caroline's hand closed around his arm, her long nails digging in slightly as she whispered something in his ear. His expression hardened. We'll discuss this another time, he said tightly, when you were being more rational. After they left, I called Grace in tears. They brought someone to my house. Grace, they're trying to move me out of my own home. Her response was immediate. Take pictures of everything in your house. Document your valuables. And Margaret, I think it's time to talk to an elder law attorney. The next day, she drove me to meet with Patricia Winters, a no-nonsense woman whose office walls were lined with degrees and family photos. Unfortunately, Mrs. Reynolds, your situation is not unique, she said after listening to my story. What is unusual is that you were catching it early and taking action. Attorney Winters helped me draft a new will, health care directives, and financial powers of attorney, naming my sister as my agent with Grace as backup. These supersede any documents you might have previously signed, she explained, though I assured her I'd signed nothing, and they clearly demonstrate your current capacity and wishes. She also recommended I write a letter to Michael and Caroline, formally stating that I did not consent to any changes in my living arrangements or financial management. We'll send it by certified mail so they can't claim they didn't receive it. The letter was delivered the following Monday. By Wednesday, Michael was pounding on my door, Caroline beside him looking like thunder. What the hell is this, Mom? He demanded, waving the letter. Some lawyer telling us to back off? Are you serious right now? I invited them in, keeping my voice level with an effort. I am very serious, Michael. You've been pushing me to make changes I don't want or need. This letter simply makes my wishes clear. Caroline's perfect mask slipped. Then your wishes. What about Michael's peace of mind? What about what's best for this family? And what exactly is best for this family, Caroline? I asked, looking her directly in the eyes. Moving me out of my home, taking control of my finances. Please explain how that benefits anyone but yourselves. Michael stepped between us. That's enough, Mom. You're clearly not thinking rationally. Caroline and I are trying to protect you, and you're treating us like criminals. I felt a strange calm descend over me. If you were not acting like criminals, why do my protective measures bother you so much? Legitimate caregivers welcome transparency. Caroline's eyes narrowed to slits. You know what, Margaret? I tried to be nice about this. I tried to respect you as Michael's mother, but you are making that impossible. She turned to Michael. Tell her what happens if she keeps this up and tell her. Michael looked trapped, glancing between his wife and me. Mom, he said finally, his voice low. If you don't cooperate with us on this, we won't be able to see you anymore. Caroline feels it's too stressful, and I have to support my wife. The threat hung in the air between us, my own son threatening to cut contact if I didn't surrender my autonomy, my home, my financial security. In that moment, something crystallized within me, a clarity of purpose, of righteous anger. That's your choice to make, Michael, I said quietly, but understand this. I will not be bullied, not even by my own child, not even for the threat of losing you. Caroline made a disgusted noise. This is pointless. She's too stubborn to see reason. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Come on, Michael. We tried it your way. Now we do it my way. After they left, I sat in my kitchen, trembling, wondering what Caroline's way might entail. I didn't have long to wait. 3 days later, I received formal notice of a competency hearing. They were taking me to court, claiming I was mentally incompetent to manage my own affairs. The document listed evidence of my alleged incapacity, incidents twisted into unrecognizable forms. The time I'd asked Michael to repeat himself on the phone became an ability to comprehend simple conversations. My preference for written lists, a habit I'd had since my 20s, was dependence on memory aids due to significant cognitive decline. Most shocking was the claim that neighbors had reported seeing me wandering, confused in my night clothes, and absolute fabrication. Grace was furious when I showed her the papers. They were lying, Margaret. This is elder abuse, plain and simple. Attorney Winters was more measured, but equally concerned. They were hoping you will be too embarrassed or intimidated to fight this, she explained. Many elders give in rather than have their competence questioned publicly, but we are not going to let that happen. She immediately filed a counter petition and began gathering evidence: my recent medical evaluations, statements from colleagues at the hospital where I volunteered, testimonials from friends and neighbors, even records of my book club discussions showing my mental acuity. The weeks before the hearing were the darkest of my life. Michael stopped communicating entirely except through his attorney, a slick young man with expensive cufflinks and a dismissive manner. Several mutual friends became awkward around me, clearly having heard Michael and Caroline's version of events. Twice I came home to find my mailbox open, letters disturbed. Once I could swear someone had been in my house. Nothing was missing, but things were slightly out of place. My desk drawers not quite closed. The security camera Grace had insisted I install showed no one, which was almost more unsettling. I lost 7 ounces. I couldn't sleep without medication. I kept thinking of Michael as a child, wondering where I'd gone wrong, how we'd come to this place where my son was willing to publicly humiliate me, to strip me of my rights. For what? For money, for Caroline's approval. The questions haunted me, stealing my appetite, my rest, my peace. Only my anger kept me going, a slow-burning righteous fury that grew with each legal document, each twisted truth. Each day my son chose his wife's schemes over his mother's well-being. The morning of the hearing dawned bright and clear, a beautiful May Day that seemed to mock the ugliness I was about to face in court. Grace arrived early to drive me, taking one look at my face and wrapping me in a fierce hug. "Remember," she said, pulling back to meet my eyes, "this isn't about proving yourself to Michael or Caroline. This is about protecting yourself from them." Attorney Winters met us at the courthouse steps, impeccable in a navy suit, carrying a bulging briefcase. "We're well prepared, Mrs. Reynolds. Try not to worry." But worry I did, especially when I saw Michael and Caroline enter with their attorney, and to my shock, Dr. Fielding, a geriatric specialist I'd never met. Were they planning to have a doctor I'd never consulted testify about my mental state? The audacity stole my breath. Caroline was dressed conservatively in a G-dress that somehow made her look both professional and vulnerable. Michael wouldn't meet my eyes, staring at the floor as we took our places on opposite sides of the courtroom. Judge Helen Winters was a stern-looking woman in her 60s with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She reviewed the documents before her with methodical care, occasionally glancing up to study first me, then Michael and Carolyn. When she spoke, her voice filled the room despite its quiet tone. "Before we begin, I want to be clear about something. This court takes allegations of incapacity very seriously. Both the risk of leaving a vulnerable person without proper protection and the equally serious risk of unnecessarily stripping a capable adult of their fundamental rights." The hearing began with Michael's attorney presenting their case. He painted a picture of me as a once capable woman, now sliding into confusion and paranoia, making poor financial decisions, becoming suspicious of family members trying to help. Dr. Fielding testified that in his experience my reported behaviors were consistent with early cognitive decline, though he admitted under my attorney's cross-examination that he had never examined me, never even met me before today, and was basing his opinion entirely on Michael and Caroline's descriptions. Caroline took the stand next, her performance masterful. Her voice trembled just slightly as she described her deep concern for her beloved mother-in-law. She detailed incidents I barely recognized the time. One supposedly got lost driving to her house. I'd taken an intentional detour to avoid construction. The occasion I forgot their anniversary. I sent a card the day before, which she never acknowledged. My paranoid reaction to their attempts to help me with financial planning. "We're just heartbroken," she said, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. "We only want what's best for Margaret." When Michael testified, I barely recognized my own son. He spoke robotically, as if reciting lines, occasionally glancing at Carolyn for approval. "My mother needs help," he concluded. "She's not the same person she used to be." Those words cut deeper than anything else. Not the same person. Had he really convinced himself of this, or was he simply saying what Caroline wanted to hear? Either way, the betrayal was complete. The son I'd raised was now a stranger testifying against me, trying to have me declared incompetent for his own gain. Then it was my turn. As I walked to the witness stand, my blue folder of documents slipped from my trembling hands, papers scattering across the polished floor. I heard Caroline's unmistakable snicker as I knelt to gather them. "This old woman has no voice here," she whispered to her attorney, just loud enough for me to hear. "She's confused, forgetful. You know how they get." The way she emphasized, they made my blood boil. I looked up and caught Judge Winters watching the exchange, her expression inscrutable. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said as I finally took my seat. "In my courtroom, everyone has a voice, especially those who others try to silence." Her words gave me strength. I took a deep breath and began to tell my story clearly, chronologically, with specific dates and details. I presented my medical reports, statements from colleagues, documentation of my volunteer work. I explained the timeline of Michael and Caroline's increasing attempts to control my finances and living arrangements despite no change in my circumstances or abilities. "Your Honor," I said, my voice growing stronger as I spoke, "I am not just fighting for my autonomy today. I am fighting for my dignity, for the right to be seen as a person, not a problem or a resource to be managed." I looked directly at Michael for the first time that day. "I don't know if my son is being influenced or if he's a willing participant in this attempt to take control of my assets, but either way, I cannot and will not surrender my independence to people who have shown they don't have my best interests at heart." After my testimony, my attorney presented our evidence that cognitive assessments showing I was functioning normally, bank records demonstrating my consistent and appropriate financial management, statements from friends and colleagues attesting to my mental clarity and capability. Dr. Morris testified about my excellent health and cognitive function, directly contradicting Dr. Fielding's speculative assessment. The hospital volunteer coordinator spoke about my reliable service and sharp mind. Even Mr. Daniels from the bank appeared, describing me as one of our most organized and financially responsible clients. Throughout it all, I watched Michael's face. I saw confusion, doubt, and I thought flashes of shame as the truth of what he was participating in became increasingly clear. Caroline, by contrast, grew visibly angry, whispering furiously to their attorney, her perfect posture growing rigid with tension. When Judge Winters called a brief recess before delivering her decision, Caroline didn't even look at me, but Michael did just once, a fleeting glance that contained what regret, uncertainty. It was gone before I could be sure. When court resumed, Judge Winters didn't mince words. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony in this matter, I find the petition for conservatorship to be without merit. Not only has Mrs. Reynolds demonstrated her complete capacity to manage her own affairs, but I find deeply troubling evidence of what appears to be an orchestrated attempt to create the illusion of incapacity where none exists. Caroline gasped audibly. Michael stared at the table. Mrs. Reynolds, the judge continued, looking directly at me, this court affirms your right to independence and self-determination. No one, regardless of their relationship to you, has the right to remove your autonomy without clear and compelling evidence of genuine incapacity. Then she did something unexpected. She turned to Michael and Caroline. Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, I strongly advise you to reflect on your actions. What has occurred here skirts dangerously close to elder exploitation, a criminal offense in this state, while Mrs. Reynolds has not pressed such charges at this time. She would be well within her rights to do so. Caroline's face drained of color. Michael looked physically ill. This hearing is adjourned. Judge Winters concluded, her gavel striking with finality that echoed through the suddenly silent courtroom. Outside, Grace hugged me tightly. You did it, Margaret. You stood your ground. Attorney Winters looked pleased but cautious. This is a significant victory, but stay vigilant. Unfortunately, these situations can escalate when the initial attempt fails. I was too emotionally exhausted to worry about what might come next, and all I could feel was the hollow ache where my relationship with my son used to be. How could we ever recover from this? Would I ever trust him again? Did I even want to trek? As Grace and I turned to leave, I heard my name called. Michael was standing alone by a concrete planter, Caroline nowhere in sight. Mom, he said, his voice rose. Can I talk to you for a minute? Grace squeezed my arm. I'll be right over there if you need me, she said, stepping away, but keeping us in sight. I approached my son cautiously, unsure what to expect. His eyes were red-rimmed, his tie loosened. He looked defeated, but also relieved. I don't know what to say, he began, then stopped, swallowing hard. I've made terrible mistakes. Been weak when I should have been strong. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar from his teenage years that it made my heart ache. Caroline, he started, then shook his head. No, I can't blame this on her. I let this happen. I participated. I'm so ashamed. I can barely look at you. The raw honesty in his voice made me believe him despite everything. Why, Michael? I asked, the question that had tormented me for months. Why did you do this to me? He took a shady breath. It started small. Caroline talking about how we should help you manage things, then about how your house was too big, how you'd be happier somewhere with care available, then about your assets, how they could be better managed for everyone's benefit. He looked down. Each step seemed reasonable at that time, or I convinced myself it was, but it was never about helping you. I see that now. Are you leaving her? I asked bluntly. He looked startled, then thoughtful. I honestly don't know. Today showed me things about her and about myself that I can't unsee, but I know this. I'm done participating in any schemes involving you. I am so sorry, Mom. I know that's not enough, but I am truly deeply sorry. He was crying now, this grown man who I'd raised to be honest and kind. I wanted to comfort him, but the wound was still too fresh, the trust too broken. I can't forgive this yet, Michael, I said honestly. I need time and I need to see real change, not just words. He nodded, wiping his eyes. I understand. I'll give you space. But I want you to know I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this right, even if it takes years." As he turned to leave, he added quietly, "The judge was right. You know, you've always had a voice. I just stopped listening. That's my greatest shame." The weeks that followed, I rebuilt my sense of security and peace. I installed a comprehensive security system in my home. I documented and photographed all my valuables. I established a relationship with a new bank where neither Michael nor Caroline had any connections. Most importantly, I connected with a support group for elders who had experienced similar betrayals. Their stories helped me see I wasn't alone, that family financial exploitation was shockingly common, and that recovery, both practical and emotional, was possible. Michael kept his word about giving me space, but sent a handwritten letter each week, simple notes, at first apologies, memories, hopes, then longer reflections showing he was genuinely grappling with what had happened, with his own complicity with the man he had become and the man he wanted to be. Caroline, I learned from mutual acquaintances, had been furious after the court hearing. She'd wanted to appeal the decision, but apparently Michael had finally stood firm against her wishes. They were in counseling, though whether to repair their marriage or navigate its end, I wasn't sure. 3 months after the hearing, I agreed to meet Michael for coffee at a neutral location, a small cafe where Grace could accidentally check on me if needed. He arrived early, waiting outside rather than claiming a table, letting me set the terms of our meeting. He looked different than her, more serious, with a new gentleness in his bearing. "Thank you for coming, Mom," he said simply, and waited for me to choose our seats to determine how this would go. We talked for almost 2 hours. He explained how Caroline had isolated him gradually, poisoning his relationship, not just with me, but with other friends and family who might have interfered. How her childhood and foster care had left her with a deep insecurity that manifested as control and materialism. How he had enabled her worst impulses out of misguided love and conflict avoidance. "None of that excuses what we did," he emphasized. "I just want you to understand I wasn't acting out of malice toward you. I was weak. I was wrong. Are you still together?" I finally asked the question that had been on my mind. He sighed heavily. "No, we separated 6 weeks ago." The court hearing was a wake-up call for me, but Caroline, she couldn't accept it. Couldn't accept that her plan had failed, that you had stood up to her, that I was questioning everything. He twisted his wedding band, which he still wore. The final straw was finding out she'd been secretly contacting assisted living facilities in other states, planning to try again where the judge wouldn't know our history. The revelation should have shocked me, but somehow it didn't. Caroline had shown who she was, and that person would not be deterred by one legal setback. "I am sorry your marriage ended," I said, and meant it despite everything. "No one enters marriage expecting it to fail." Michael gave a sad smile. "I'm not sure it was ever real, Mom. I think I was in love with who I thought she was, not who she actually is." The insight surprised Mitt, showed a level of self-awareness I hadn't been sure my son still possessed. That coffee meeting was the first step in a long, careful reconciliation. Over the following months, Michael worked to rebuild trust in small, consistent ways. He respected my boundaries. He attended therapy. He apologized to Grace and Attorney Winters. He openly answered any questions I had about the terrible scheme he'd participated in. Slowly, cautiously, we found our way back to something like a mother-son relationship, forever changed by what had happened, but perhaps ultimately stronger for having weathered the storm. As for me, I found a new sense of purpose in sharing my story with other seniors through community workshops and support groups. Working with Attorney Winters, I helped establish a local elder justice initiative to educate older adults about their rights and the warning signs of exploitation. "Your experience could help others avoid similar situations," she told me, and the thought that some good might come from my pain was deeply healing. A year after the court hearing, I received an unexpected letter from Judge Helen Winters. She was retiring and writing to a few people whose cases had particularly affected her. "Your courage in standing up for yourself despite the heartbreak of facing your own son in court has stayed with me," she wrote, You reminded me why the law matters not as an abstract concept, but as a shield protecting real people's dignity and autonomy. In my 27 years on the bench, yours is one of the cases I'll remember most vividly. I keep that letter in my desk drawer and read it sometimes when I need reminding of my own strength. The path I've walked wasn't one I would have chosen, but it has led me to a place of deeper wisdom and fiercer independence. I've learned that family ties, while precious, are not a license for exploitation, that age is not synonymous with vulnerability or incapacity, that my voice matters and I must never surrender my right to use it. So, if you are listening to my story and something in it resonates with your own experience, if you felt dismissed because of your age, if family members are showing concerning interest in your assets, if you are being isolated or made to doubt your own competence, please hear me. You have a voice, you have rights, you are not alone. Reach out to an elder law attorney, to adult protective services, to trusted friends. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Fight for your dignity. And if you know someone facing these challenges, someone being silenced or manipulated, share my story with them. Tell them about a retired nurse who stood up in court when her own son tried to declare her incompetent. Tell them there is help available. There is hope possible. There is healing on the other side of betrayal. I still garden every spring, nurturing my tomato seedlings as I've done for decades. Sometimes Michael comes by to help our relationship, healing slowly like a broken bone that will never be quite the same, but can still support weight, still allow movement forward. We don't speak of Caroline, who moved to another state after the divorce was finalized. Life has a different shape now than I once imagined it would, but it is still my life, lived on my terms with my voice intact, and even stronger for having been tested. Take a moment and think who in your life might need to hear this story, who might be silently struggling with family members who see them as assets rather than people. Reach out to them today. Listen to them, believe them. Help them find their voice before they face the heartbreak of a courtroom battle with their own blood. And remember, age may change our bodies, but it need never diminish our rights, our dignity, or our fundamental worth as human beings. That old woman, the court, declared competent. She's still here, still speaking, still being heard.